finds it, they find it. So everybody be nice. And I'll let you know when it's going. All right. We're ready for our maiden voyage. We are live on YouTube now, so here we go. Welcome to the Andy Staples Show. It is a Friday lines and numbers edition, although if you happen to find this broadcast on YouTube Live, you can watch it on Thursday as we record it. I'm here with Ari Wasserman. We didn't advertise the recording of the video version of this podcast because we didn't know if it would have Ari cussing at his new mic arm the entire time because it came with no instructions.
Yeah, I mean, I was cussing, and then Andy walked me through it over FaceTime. The joy of technology. You think the number one thing you would do when you send somebody a piece of equipment is to put instructions in there, especially for people like me who can't even screw in a light bulb, but we made it.
We did, and instructions do matter. Home ownership will help you, Ari. As you get older, when you buy your own house, you will learn to do stuff and fix stuff. And I promise, when I was an apartment dweller, I couldn't do anything. Now I am slightly more capable.
2 words, new build.
It's exactly. Turnkey.
Yeah, I don't have any patience for that stuff, but hopefully one day that'll be a talent that I can acquire.
Oh, I have faith in you, Ari. I have a lot of faith in you, but yeah, it's interesting because we're trying to figure out what we're going to talk about during the show. As we speak, Greg Sankey is talking about the SEC's new deal with ESPN that does not start until 2024. It's funny, they announced at 2:00 there was going to be a press conference at 6:00 Eastern time. And you don't do that in 2020 if it's not a huge deal, because you kind of scare people. And so I figured out what it was about after, a few minutes, and we got it out there. We got the news out there because it was like my first calls were to Florida, LSU, Alabama, Arkansas. Like, are you still playing this weekend? Because I thought maybe the SEC was going to try to follow suit with the other leagues and give their championship game teams a week off. And then when somebody from one of those schools called me back and like, no, we're playing, don't worry. I was like, okay, what's the announcement? And they're like, I don't know. And then somebody called, it's the TV deal. So I called some other people. It is the TV deal. And we knew about this last year. We knew CBS was not going to keep paying for that deal because they had the best bargain in sports. They were paying $55 million a year for a package that was worth $300 million a year. So they didn't want to keep paying for it once their deal ended. So ESPN's going to do it. And now that game is going to be on ABC, which, Ari, you didn't grow up in the South, so that probably doesn't mean much to you. But to those
I get it, though.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you watched Uncle Vern your whole life, pretty much, this is going to be weird, even though Uncle Vern is no longer doing the game. So it was already weird when Brad Nessler replaced him. But this is going to be weird once it happens.
Yeah, it was nice to have some diversity, too, in the broadcasts. I don't know about you, but I just feel like most broadcasts feel the same now, and that actually was unique. It felt different, and the viewership of college football is every bit as part of the sport as going to the games. And the music that you hear, the score boxes and the graphics on the television, it just bled SEC. And like now it's just going to be like every other big game. And, I guess that's the way it is. But I do understand attachments to traditions, and I felt like that might be one of them, especially from an outsider. I can't imagine if you were a big SEC person, that music going into the SEC championship game, everything yeah, I feel like
what's weird is CBS used that for football games before they had the SEC deal.
It's all SEC to me, and that's all I care. History started when the SEC took over that. Just like the NBC, NBA stuff too. It's like, you're never going to get that out of your head.
You mean John Tesh's Round Ball Rock?
Why don't you sing that one for us? That's the best intro music in the history of sports.
Not the Olympic theme. The Olympic theme is pretty strong.
I'd take that over anything. We should do a random ranking one of these days of best intro music at sporting
I have
events.
done that random ranking like 10 times.
Oh, okay. Well, I've never done it, so I'll have to go listen.
We will do this. We will do this one of those days when I have the audio clips ready to play on the show. That's when we'll do it, because I'm not going to sing every one of them, because you don't want me singing the Olympic themes. Dun, 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 no, I'm not going to do it.
Every single time you start singing one of the themes, your shoulders get rocking. I don't know if it's because we're on YouTube or what, but you're feeling yourself right now.
Or Heavy Action, which is the actual name of the Monday Night Football theme song, which is a great name for a Monday Night Football theme song. No, but that is the most common response I got after the news came out. I'll break it down for you. It was basically 34% of the people said, no, I love the CBS broadcast. And in parentheses, they're also saying, I don't read Sports Business Journal because John Oren for the Sports Business Journal reported a year ago that this was going to happen. So we all knew this was going to happen. 33% said, good, Gary Danielson hates my team anyway, which is one of the great fun things about college football is all the fans who imagine that some announcer hates their team when the announcer really could not care less whether their team wins or loses. Another 30%. Now 33%. Now ESPN will shill even harder for the SEC. And I don't think that's possible. They already own the SEC network. Having one more game, I mean, now they're SEC completists. They have all the rights, but I don't think they'll shill any harder than they already did. Plus, they still have business relationships with the other leagues.
It's funny though, when you said the press conference thing and I saw that people were tweeting about that, I was like, I looked up to the sky and I said, please don't be canceling the SEC championship game. Please don't be telling us that something terrible is going to happen. Because if the SEC championship game was put into a weird spot or something else, I don't know how much more I can handle at this point. And I can't imagine what the fans feel like.
That's the thing. I mean, like in this year where every press release is a cancellation, don't give 4 hours lead time on a press conference and make people freak out. Like I didn't, sometimes I feel bad when I steal somebody's thunder by reporting what the press conference is going to be about, but I didn't this time because people's imaginations were spinning wildly.
Not so this year.
To put some facts to it.
Yeah. It's like interesting too with college football fans. And it's like funny because the sport is all about tradition and everything that, goes along with college football's tradition. And even the theme music and the network that you are accustomed to watching the game on is part of that.
Well, exactly right. And CBS broadcasts had a feel to them, as you mentioned. It's a kind of a cinematic feel. For those who don't know, if it looked like they had more cameras than most broadcasts, it's because they did. This was a crew that normally does golf tournaments. And so they had a ton of cameras. Craig Silver, who's the producer of the broadcast now and has been for a long time, he's a wizard. Like, it looks like a movie. It's incredible. And different networks have different feels. Fox feels different. And then, ESPN feels different. ESPN, I think, probably has the most reliable feel, that across conferences, across games, but it feels a little too slick compared to the SEC. I think, they did a good job at ESPN trying to give that ABC 8:00 Saturday night game that same cinematic feel. I remember, you remember the Clemson game where they had the Steadicam shot of the bus coming and then them going down the hill. That was beautiful. And if ESPN can give that treatment to those SEC games on ABC, then that's good. That's what you want, because these games have always been really special to people, and the presentation of the game means a lot. So I hope they appreciate that. And Lord knows they're going to be paying through the nose for it. So they ought to devote some resources to it.
I think it's aptly put. The CBS broadcasts sometimes or all the time felt like a golf tournament a little bit. And it's like, I don't know, like even the big games, there was a sort of relaxing feel to it. I don't know if I'm
well, that I think that was Vern though. Vern was better than anybody else at toggling between I am the voice of God and I'm your buddy next to you on the bar stool. And nobody else can do it. Like, Brad Nessler is a really good broadcaster, but he's in voice of God mode the entire time. And it's great because his voice of God mode is really good, but the thing is, Vern was so great at toggling it. I mean, Vern and Gary dancing to Soulja Boy at Auburn, Georgia in 2007 is one of the funniest things you will ever see in your life. Like, it is unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. I also wonder too, if like the time slots are part of it. Cause I don't know if I'm just making this up in my imagination, but it always seemed like some of these big regular season SEC matchups were at 3:30, and it kind of had like the stage to itself where it's like you got the college football.
Well, it contractually did for most of the time.
Yeah,
I mean,
but those biggest games usually reserved on ESPN until this big noon kickoff started to change things up a little bit. You know, for the majority of my viewership as a college football consumer, the biggest SEC games were always like the matinee in between the night game that was ever going to be coming on ESPN and the morning action. Then it was like the most relaxing time of day, you know, when the sun's going down and you got good old Vern talking, and it's just like the time slot.
And the commercials were so long that it was going to go till 7:30 anyway.
Yeah.
And so you'd be ready to go for the 8 o'clock kicks.
Yeah. You know, I have some nostalgic feelings. I mean, I think there's nothing more relaxing on earth than covering a football game on Saturday, returning to your house, and then watching the NFL with a window open in the fall with some candles going and maybe a pie on the way. Like that's my happy place.
A pizza pie or a pie?
A pizza pie. That's pizza is pie. If we're going to continue to do this podcast together, you gotta know that, man.
These glimpses into your worldview amaze me.
Well, my father used to call them wheels, which I think I should put into we have a wheel on the way.
Oh, and your dad's going to be on the show one of these days. We'll put the explicit thing on there so he can be on.
I am the way I am because of that, man. And, you know, there's some good and some bad to it. But, you know, I think
I'm more interested in the lighting candles and opening a window, which I do if I fart in the bathroom. I open a window and light a candle, but I've never thought to do that while watching football, but maybe I'll try.
The best season of the year is fall. I think everybody can agree with that. And I don't know if
unquestionably
Florida has the same feel of leaves changing, foliage, and nice breeze.
I'll give you a prime example, because I've always, you know, wondered what heaven looks like. And I had this image in my mind that heaven is different for every person, that heaven is whatever they think heaven is.
Yeah.
And so my idea of heaven is perpetually a cool fall morning, running around with all the leaves in the yard, and football is about to come on. A cool fall Saturday morning where football is about to come on. There's biscuits and gravy, and that is heaven. That you are perpetually about to enjoy a college football Saturday in that environment. So I'm with you.
Running around like exercising. Or you mean like
playing catch or just messing around?
Wanted to make sure that you weren't exercising.
No, you're on a lake or you're on the beach or something like that. It's heaven. You can make it pretty much as perfect as you want.
I don't know if I've given much thought to what my personal heaven would be. All I know is that whatever my activity was, you have a pie on the way. That you know, because that's the best part of the pizza.
Multiple types of pies. I would want a pizza pie, and I would also want maybe like a pecan pie.
Yeah, the best part about pizza is anticipating its arrival. Like, you know.
Well,
that's the apex of your life, really. And then
you know what plays during that heavenly day that just repeats. I'm assuming it's a loop at some point.
I like how your neck vein is exposed when you do that. You're really into it. And yeah, it just it is a shame. It is kind of like, on one hand, it's like you might think, who cares what network it's on, but also, every time networks change and contracts change, a little piece of like how we view the viewership in the sport changes. And, you know, in like 10 years on Twitter, someone's going to tweet out, remember this? Dun, 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 and then you're going to be like, of course I remember it, but it's going to make you feel nostalgic to the way you used to love watching the game. So, you know.
Unless ESPN buys it, because here's the thing. CBS intends to run out the string of this contract. For the right price, my guess is CBS would be willing to part with it. And if you're going to pay that much, and then I'm sure they would have to pay a fortune to CBS to make that happen, you go, hey, CBS, we're already paying you out the nose. How about you throw in the theme song? Do you know if the first ABC broadcast of the SEC on ABC at 3:30 Eastern time comes on, whether that's in 2021 or 2022 or 2023 or 2024, and you hear that, people would go crazy.
Yeah, especially if it wasn't something you were expecting. But also, I don't know that I love it. You know, like Michael Bublé's got a beautiful voice, but nobody sings it like Sinatra did.
Well, no, it's this. You get the same.
I know
song,
it's the
they
same
actually tried to
exact
alter
thing,
it
but
this
it's
year,
just
and that wasn't great either.
the also part of it too is the assimilation with the graphics and the network and the entire ambiance of the. It's not just the song; it's everything.
So
The
you're
blue
telling me
graphics,
they're going to pick some crappy 30 Seconds to Mars song and just play it
just
out of
have
every
or
commercial
just have
break?
some obscure rapper create a 30-second verse about the game like they do with the Monday night game now. You know, it's getting. I mean, nothing's going to ever beat the
Oh,
NBA
don't
on
do
NBC and
that.
all that stuff. That's what that you said, the Monday night theme song. Do you ever really hear that anymore? Do they still even play it?
No, and then you had the Hank Williams Jr. theme, which was the theme for a long time, and then that was gone. But they do play the Monday night theme song every week for a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I think they do. I do. But I don't know. It's just like they have like these live performers now and the lights and all this stuff. It's just not. I think with the theme song and theme music, less is more.
Well, now it's Carrie Underwood asking if you're ready for Sunday.
Yeah, are you ready for Are you ready for Sunday night? No, I'm ready to watch the game and like have cool theme music. I'm not ready for your improv.
Listen, if you haven't heard Carrie Underwood and her son singing "Little Drummer Boy" on her Christmas album, I can't help it. Probably very lost on you, Ari.
No. I'm you know, I live in the world. I know what music is, especially during this time of year, and everybody likes Christmas music.
Well, her son hasn't figured out how to pronounce ours yet, so it's "pa wumpa pum pum" when he sings. It's pretty awesome. So let's talk college football this week, Ari, because what we were originally going to talk about before the SEC ESPN news broke was there is no whoa Martha results this year. Now, what's a whoa Martha result? That's you're sitting at the table or on the couch and you see a score come across and you just do the spit take. You spit out everything. Whoa, Martha, you see that? None of those this year. It just hasn't happened. And I'm really surprised because you figured this year would be the year of the unexpected. But it's almost like you have this group of teams that is competing for championships and really deeply cares about what's going on. And then you have a group of teams where it hasn't gone the way they wanted. And so they're just not as motivated. And so you haven't seen a really crazy upset that just changes everything.
Okay, so can I just like get this out of the way right now?
Do it.
I think part of the reason why you're not seeing those moments is even when teams are infected by COVID and players are out, certain teams are impacted more than others based on the depth and talent that they have on their roster. And I think that as easy as it is to say, well, why in the craziest year ever where everything is going weird ways and players are being ruled out left and right, and why has there been no 30-point underdog to beat a playoff contender? The reason why is when a team that's in the playoff contention discussion from the beginning of the season, usually the most talented teams in college football lose 20 players, they've got really good ones behind them. And I think that like if you really pull the curtain back a little bit and try to figure out exactly how that's happening, I think that's the most logical answer. The teams with the most good players are good, and the teams that have 3 or 4 good players, if they're missing those 3 or 4 elite level NFL players or one of the 3, they're entirely different than they are when they have everybody. And it's like Alabama, this is the example that I keep using whenever I bring this up, but Andy, Alabama lost Jaden Waddle and now has the most explosive offense in college football. What would happen?
Well, had the most explosive offense and now has a slightly less explosive offense that's still the best offense in college football. Yeah.
If you put Jalen Waddle on any other team, maybe not Ohio State or Clemson or the teams that are in that discussion, Andy, but like what would that do to one middle tier team? It like would ruin everything. It's like if you took Seth Williams off of Auburn, could you imagine? That's already bad enough as it goes. But like if you take the marquee player off of, like even if you go through the playoff rankings, let's take the marquee player out of every single one of those teams. Take Breece Hall out.
Yes.
You know, and what does that do to that team? You know, and Ohio State, just to use us as an example, because they're the most recent example of this, lost 23 players last week and won 52-12, 5 of which were starters. You take 5 starters out of every other team in the top 15 outside of the top 4 or 5, you have a drastically different football team.
Well, and if Justin Fields wasn't one of the ones playing, I don't know that Ohio State, because remember, for most of the first half, he didn't know where the snap was going to wind up. And if you're not as good as Justin Fields, you turn that into some awfully negative plays, but he's Justin Fields and he made it work.
Yeah, it's all about sustaining ability through depth. And college football is about that in normal seasons, because you have to be able to overcome injury. And injury has happened, and for whatever reason in this year, we've forgotten that injuries are still happening on top of all this. But at a moment's notice, you could be without your best player or one of your most important players. And most teams in college football aren't built to sustain those losses. I mean, Wisconsin was a completely different football team last week without a few receivers out there. And it's like Graham Mertz went from Heisman Trophy as a redshirt freshman and first-round draft pick to turnover city and losing to 2 teams that Wisconsin should have been or we thought was better than.
Well, perhaps we should not have given Graham Mertz the Kenny Trill Hill Memorial first week Heisman Trophy after the Illinois game.
Should have. He was a 4-star prospect in the top 100. That's all I need.
We can get into this week's games since you mentioned Wisconsin, because this is the only Big Ten game I feel like we need to talk about at this point. Is Wisconsin a 1.5 favorite at Iowa? Iowa actually feels like it's playing the best of anybody in the Big Ten West right now.
Yeah, it kind of seems like a stinky line, doesn't it?
It does.
Especially considering the fact that I think Wisconsin's number 1 receiver is out again, and Wisconsin's offense has kind of looked horrid, to use a pretty strong word.
I was going to say pedestrian, but you can go horrid. That's fine.
Yeah. I mean, it was, or terrifying. I used to say that a lot in my 20s. God, that's terrifying.
But it's not really terrifying. It's terrifying to Wisconsin. It's not terrifying to opposing defenses right now.
Depends how big your bet ticket is, how terrifying things are. I mean, things get terrifying real quick. Yeah, I don't know. Like, what is make the case, Andy, to me that why Wisconsin's going to win this football game? Because I can't. I can't. And Iowa's getting points at home. So that's when I feel like you can kind of jump all over, because it just seems a little weird to me. It's like, what do you make of Wisconsin's loss to Indiana last week? Because it's like, on one hand, we spent
Indiana's
the entire week
good defensively.
We spent the entire week saying Indiana is a legit Big Ten championship contender and maybe should go, depending on how you view that, over Ohio State. Obviously, the rules change, but Indiana has been an interesting discussion. And then they just completely shut down Wisconsin's offense. Now, Indiana is a good football team because we know what their offense could do, especially when Michael Penix Jr. was not injured. But they shut down Wisconsin, couldn't score.
Well, and let's remember, Tom Allen's a defensive coach. That's the side of the ball he came from. And so they were good on defense before they got good on offense. So I think they're a pretty complete team. I think that's what we've learned about Indiana. But Iowa started off the season badly, lost a couple of games, and then has just come roaring back. So yeah, I would take Iowa getting points at home in this situation. I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah. And unless there's just something fishy going on here. And,
right.
The interesting thing about Iowa's schedule really is that if you take away listen, we all remember how terrifying Iowa's offseason was. I mean, they had a really tough offseason with some, stuff going on with their strength coach and treating all athletes equally. And, you all know the stories. And the fact that they came into the season to lose their first 2, you're thinking, wow, this place is damaged right now. And rightfully so, you might have thought that. Especially considering the fact, weren't they up 17-0 at one point on Northwestern before losing?
Yeah, and listen, everybody was doing the Kirk Ferentz buyout math, and they're not really doing it now. So
they come back and they're blowing people out, Andy. 49-7 Michigan State, 35-7 Minnesota, 41-21 at Penn State. Weird game against Nebraska, but pulled it out. And then a 2-touchdown win over Illinois. It's like things are clicking there. And I just part of me just feels like I would blindly bet Wisconsin here because it doesn't make sense. And my feeling is to always bet into the things that don't make sense.
Stinky line radar.
Yeah. I know that hasn't always worked out well for me, but I can't make a case for why you would bet on Wisconsin, which is why it doesn't make sense that they're the favorite.
Yeah, it is an odd one, but let's move to what would be Woe Martha games if they went the way that Vegas doesn't expect them to go, but I just don't see any possible way that happens. LSU at Florida and Alabama at Arkansas. These are both games that, probably if you gave Greg Sankey his druthers, he'd pull a John Swofford and just say, Alabama, Florida, please take the week off and play the best game you possibly can play next week, and both of you get in the playoff if you can. But Florida, a 23-point favorite against an LSU team that, we don't even know who's gonna show up. They lost Eric Gilbert, the tight end, freshman, maybe one of the best freshmen in the country. He's off the team. He's opted out for the rest of the season. We don't know if he's coming back to school. We don't know who else they've lost at this point, but this is just a skeleton crew coming to Florida that doesn't have a lot of motivation. And what do you do if you're Dan Mullen in this situation? Because you should be able to kind of name your score. Do you pull your starters if you get a decent lead, even if it's really early?
Yeah. 23-point spread is big, but it's not huge.
Right.
23-point
if you're
spread.
Up 21 and somebody scores, all of a sudden you're one mistake away from this being a really close game.
What's the universal number from a coach's standpoint where you feel comfortable to take your players out?
28.
Is that like the rule?
No, I'm just using my own instinct. I think 28 feels comfortable. And if they get it down to 21, then you can think about putting starters back in.
Yeah. 28, I guess it also depends too on whether or not the opposing team is showing a pulse or in what quarter it is. Like if you're up 28 nothing.
If it's a feisty opponent and they're trying hard, but they're making mistakes, throwing picks, fumbling, all that, then you leave your starters in a little bit longer. But yeah, if they're lifeless, if they're trying to take possessions out of the game just to make the margin smaller, if you're up 28, feel free to put your backups in.
Yeah. Listen, I watched Ohio State up 28 points in the second quarter quite a bit in the Big Ten for the past 7 years, and that was never the point. They've kept starters in up 35 and sometimes even more, depending on what time of the game is. And it's just like, especially when you have to be bubble wrapping Justin Fields everywhere he goes right now. And right. Ohio State, was up a pretty comfortable lead last year against Penn State and left him in the game a little bit long. Then he hurt his knee and was not 100% in the playoff. I think that they are a little bit longer on the draw, but 23 points, you could be, up 17 or 34-17 in the fourth quarter and you still have the game somewhat in question, depending on how neurotic your head coach is. So, wasn't the Florida line last week 23 too against Tennessee?
Yeah.
Or was it 17?
Yeah. And Tennessee backdoor covered that.
It's like, it also seems a little bit weird to me that they're laying roughly the same amount of points against LSU as Tennessee, but I guess, are they kind of in the same dynamic right now? Would you say as LSU and Tennessee?
We don't know what they have left to play for dynamic.
Yeah. It's like, cause on paper, you want to feel like there's danger there. The helmets are nice. What it is, but I don't know that there's danger there.
It's going to look weird. It looks weird. It was weird in the Alabama LSU game too. And then you would see like Gilbert, when he caught a long pass, you're like, wow, okay. So they still got some elite dudes here, but it's just, they don't have enough. The chemistry of this team is terrible. Like, I just can't imagine. Now, Alabama's going to Arkansas. Alabama is a 32-point favorite. Ari, watching Alabama against LSU, they could have scored as many as they wanted to. They took their foot off the gas. They'll be able to score as many as they want to against Arkansas as well. If you saw Arkansas play against Missouri, Arkansas's defense not in a great spot right now. This is going to be another one where it's basically, when does Nick Saban want to pull the starters?
Yeah. Yeah, if we're doing the Woe Martha thing, I don't know that I see it in either of these two games. And part of the reason why Woe Marthas are Woe Marthas is because you can't see them coming. So I think it's like every week is this going to be the upset spot? Is this team looking forward? Is this a trip up area? Is this a trap game? It's like trap games are trap games because you can't identify them before.
Right.
And I've always thought that it was kind of stupid. Was this a trap game? Well, I don't know that it's a trap game. I know that Arkansas is tough. I know it's on the road. But it'd be interesting to go back and look at the math of how many times a 30-point underdog in the Power 5 has won a football game. I venture to say it's less than 5 times in 10 years.
It's not very often, and we don't have any other spreads like that. The one other spread we did have like that was Texas by 30 over Kansas, but that game's been canceled. And we can talk about that a little later if we want. But Texas's season is now over. They're going to play in a bowl game. Which here's the other weird thing about that, Ari. National Signing Day is next Wednesday, and then you've got bowl games pretty much immediately after next week. So, like, if you're Chris Del Conte, when are you going to make that decision on Tom Herman? Like, when are you going to either say, we're keeping him, he's our guy, which Del Conte at some point is going to have to say for recruiting purposes. So he's going to need to say that between now and Wednesday, or he's going to need to say, okay, we're trying to find a new guy.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard you talk about this a lot as I listen to your show. Big fan, Andy. And we've talked about it quite a bit.
Long-time listener, first-time caller.
I think that the thing with Texas is that they were so all in with Urban that the bill that it's going to cost to replace Herman isn't worth it with the candidates that are out there. And that's not a swipe.
The juice is not worth the squeeze, as it were.
I don't think it is. I mean, do you agree? I mean, who are you paying that check for? I know Campbell's out there.
I broke it all down in a column on Monday, and I had a very hard time justifying the price. Very, very difficult time. Whether it's Mario Cristobal, Matt Campbell, James Franklin, nobody guarantees you anything. You could be in the same boat you're in now. There's even the possibility you could be in a worse position than you are now. So I don't know that it justifies writing $25 to $30 million worth of checks.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that especially when you start envisioning when fans start envisioning what the future is going to look like with Urban, whatever you replace him with, whoever you replace him with, isn't going to live up to that standard. And that's not an insult to the young guys that are in play here. That's a compliment to Urban. So at that point, you kind of wrap your mind around with how year two we're in the playoff, top 4 classes every year. Like, you start building in the automatic expectations that come with him. And that wouldn't be the expectation if Matt Campbell became the head coach. But it'd be the similar, or maybe more expensive result,
but you just don't know.
Yeah, you don't know. You can't expect it. And wouldn't Campbell actually be maybe more expensive? Some of these buyouts and some of these other situations would be more expensive than hiring a guy who works for a television network.
His buyout is $6 million right now. James Franklin's is $5 million, and Mario Cristobal's is $8 million if you hire him before January 15th, and it drops to $5 million. So very expensive. And there may be other guys that would be in the mix if that job opens, but they're all working at places and they're all also expensive to move. So that part you got to worry about. One game that is being played where a coach's job does feel like it's in the balance. And I don't know if it's necessarily in the balance because of the result of this game. I think it's one of those where the AD's just got to decide what he wants to do. Virginia at Virginia Tech. The Hokies are a 2.5-point favorite. Last year, Virginia snapped a 15-game losing streak against Virginia Tech. But the Justin Fuente thing is getting pretty weird. You know, he interviewed at Baylor last offseason. I don't think they appreciated that very much at Virginia Tech. He's already signed a couple of extensions, so he's due quite a bit of money if they want to make a move. But the recruiting is not what they want it to be. It just doesn't seem like they ever have the right chemistry. They have these weird, some games they look amazing, some games they look terrible. What do you do here, Ari?
They did look terrible one week this year. That was pretty frustrating for me. Let me ask you a question. Off the top of your head, answer honestly. Have you looked at where the recruiting class finished last year? Like, do you know the ranking?
Last year or the year before? Or the current class that
2020, last year, the one that signed in last December.
It was not great. I had to hit load more if I wanted to. 67?
76.
Woo! I had the numbers right. Just transposed.
You had the numbers right. I don't know. Last year when I saw that, I found that to be very alarming. And this year they've got a bigger class. And last year, granted, they did have a smaller class, so that does take a part into the, shock of that number. But this year they're at 44 with 23 commitments. And, I know that coaching is all about results and how the team looks and the fire in the eye of the players and are they bought in and all the stuff that you like to see.
Frank Beamer never signed top 10 classes either. Yeah.
And I don't know if Virginia Tech is going to be signing top 10 classes. And I don't know the top 10 is the standard. I think in the 30s is probably the standard for Virginia Tech, a team that had 10 years ago been a pretty constant fixture in the ACC race and, was in a playoff, or a national championship race that lost their final regular season game and didn't get in. So, this program isn't a team that should be middling. And, I know that there are some teams making moves right now in the ACC. North Carolina is making a move. Miami is about to flip a top 50 quarterback from California, from USC, and they're about to sign a top 10
I think Georgia
class.
Tech's going to get better too. As they
if Georgia Tech can figure out a way to be a bigger factor in Atlanta, they have a shot. And like the ACC, as we've always joked about on this podcast, has always been there for the taking. But I think in 3 years, it's not going to be there for the taking, because people are building some encouraging things right now.
We're talking about the coastal, not the whole league, because Clemson's got that.
Yeah, no, but still, you got programs who are building something that could be something special in 3 or 4 years if they see things through. And I think that if you're the athletic director of Virginia Tech, you've got to sit back and sit in a chair and look at the results of the talent accumulation phase and say, is this up to par? And then I think other than that to me, it's like the same thing an NFL team would do. Are we drafting well? Because it all comes down to the players. And then after that, you can start discussing, well, what were the results like? Why were the results this way?
Well, and there have also been some chemistry issues with various teams.
Right. Yeah. But the thing that I always say is it's always about having the players first and then doing what you can with the players second. And one of the I spoke to a recruiting coordinator this week who, if you're listening, what's going on, man? You know who I'm talking to. He likes the show. But cool. He said, I agree with your Stars Matter take, but the thing I wanted to make a distinction of when you talk about this is that between the teams of 15 and 30, or even 15 and 40, it's much harder to distinguish which classes are better in that group than it is between 15 and 1. And I agree with that completely. Development and, chemistry and strength coach and assistants and game plans and, to overall program philosophy, all that stuff is important. You can't. So the thing that I'm concerned about with Virginia Tech is that they're so far off of their talent accumulation phase that I don't even know that I can begin to even think about where they're going to be with their actual talent once it comes, because they don't have a chance coming out of the gate. And we've had this argument so many times, and I want to have it again. I think the most important thing in terms of evaluation with a coach is recruiting. And that's what makes the Tom Herman thing so tough, because he has recruited pretty well, but you've given him enough years of recruiting well and not developing to come to an understanding. Where are we going? But right now, Virginia Tech's not there. They're not even out of the starting.
That's the thing. Now, Virginia Tech does have a first-round draft pick, maybe, depending on where Caleb Farley goes. Now, he opted out for this season, but this is a guy that this staff recruited and developed. So they've had, a couple of weird seasons where there were chemistry issues. They were so good the first year, and then Gerard Evans just leaves. Like it was just it's been an odd tenure, because it started off great. It looked perfect. It looked like this is the ideal person to replace Frank Beamer. It's just perfect, because they have kind of the same mentality as a team. They win about the same way, but they haven't looked like that as much. And they've had, as we mentioned, a couple of games in the past couple of years, like that Duke game last year, you're just scratching your head like, how is this happening? What is going on here? And I don't know if this works long term. And Whit Babcock's got to be the one who decides that. Though that's the hard part, because he will have to pay a lot of money to make that happen.
Yeah. Virginia Tech has signed a top 100 player one time since 2017, and that was in 2017.
Wow.
So you want to start talking about ACC? It was there for the taking. You can live with that for a few years. But in a place that has access to the DMV area, has a very recognizable brand name. I don't know if it's as recognizable as it was maybe 8 years ago when they were competing at a higher level. And I know these kids when Virginia Tech was competing for a national championship, these kids were like 7. So I don't know if that counts. But, I don't know that they are anywhere near where I think they should be or could be.
Virginia Tech was competing for a national championship, they weren't even a gleam in their parents' eyes. So
I mean, I have a terrible memory.
99 was Michael Vick. When they played Florida State for the national title, it was the 99 season. So none of these players who are being recruited now had been conceived.
That's crazy to say.
Yeah, I know. It just means you're old.
Like, it makes me feel
welcome
old,
to the club.
But, you know, there were a few years in the 2000s, weren't there, where they went to a Sugar Bowl in 2004.
They pretty much owned the ACC after they joined it because the rest of the ACC was really bad. Clemson hadn't become Clemson yet, and Florida State was mired in what they call the lost decade, although I think they're probably going to have to create a new term at this point, given what's going on there now. So, yeah, they actually carried the ACC early on in their time in the conference. So it's just strange to see them like this. Let's move on to another ACC game. North Carolina at Miami. This is a game we initially, before the season started, and before we realized just how good Notre Dame was, we thought this might be the one to determine who played Clemson in the ACC title game. I'm still excited for this one, Ari. I think this is going to be a lot of fireworks.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, you know, I've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of soul searching since our Tuesday show. And I know that I freaked out about USC. But you know what?
Talk about them in a minute.
I guess we can talk about it again if you want. But Miami's kind of gotten a raw deal this year too. And I know that part of the deal it's not that they're misranked or no, I'm not saying that they are being mistreated. But the fact of the matter is that they're having a very impressive season for their standard. And like their one loss is going to be to a firing on all cylinders Clemson team. And like they just got roadblocked and never had a chance to really be a part of it. But like, I think they're a pretty good football team. And I don't know that they're great. We saw them struggle with the Virginia Tech team that we were just talking about. And I don't know that I would put Miami on the same field. But if I'm here's a better question, not who's going to win this football game. Which of these two teams are you buying stock in? If you had to pick
one? Well, here's the thing. Can Miami repeat this? I know North Carolina can. Sam Howell's back another year. If they keep Phil Longo as the offensive coordinator, the offense is going to probably look the same. But even if they lose Phil Longo, Mac knows what he wants out of the offense, so he could go find somebody. Because I think Phil Longo is a name that you're going to hear bandied about for offensive coordinator jobs, for maybe head coaching jobs, because he was a head coach at the FCS level. So that's one of those that I think they can repeat that. For Miami, this is their first year doing it. Are you keeping Rhett Lashley, or is Rhett Lashley getting a head coaching job or getting poached by a higher paying OC job in the SEC where he used to work? Or, you know, what's going to happen? Because and De'Aaron King's gone. So it's going to be up to you to have either have a quarterback that you've developed or one you sign. You know, you mentioned Jake Garcia, who was a USC commit. He's the one who played in California. When they didn't play high school football in California, he tried to move to Valdosta, Georgia, and play there. His parents even legally separated to meet the requirements, but he was still ruled ineligible. But he is now in Loganville, Georgia at Grayson High, and he's got a game, I believe, Friday night in the state quarterfinal. So, but he just decommitted from USC and is favored to commit to Miami. So could he walk in the door and start? Could Miami grab another grad transfer and do it that way? We don't know until we know what happens with Rhett Lashley, but I think that is the key. Miami's finally running the offense it's supposed to be running. Can they keep doing it if the guy who runs it leaves?
Miami's two top-rated players in their 2021 class. 5-star defensive end Leonard Taylor from Miami Palmetto, number 10 overall player in the country, and 5-star safety James Williams from Fort Lauderdale American Heritage. That, my friend, is what you got to see. And you're right. Everything you said. Absolutely. And I do think Jake Garcia could be good enough to start.
They had good defenses for a while with terrible offenses. They still need a good offense.
Florida elite level players from Dade going to Miami. That's what you need constantly. That's the only way.
Well, you mentioned one guy from Broward.
Oh, you get it. You get what I'm trying to say. I'm sorry.
Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County. Yes, I got you.
Yeah. I don't live in Florida. Everybody gets it, but
you get people in Broward get very mad if you say the only good players are in Dade and vice versa. So
Broward and Dade. Okay.
We'll bring Ace Hood in here to defend Broward
Yeah,
And
I
we'll
mean, I
bring
listen to
Uncle Luke
rap
in here to
music and I
defend
only
Dade.
hear Dade. I don't hear Broward. All I know is that when this athletic podcast blows up and I become famous, I'm going to buy a condo on Sunny Isles.
There you go.
I think I'm going to do. You were talking about beachfront property, and then I'm going to raise a son who's a 5-star prospect, and he's going to go to Miami, and then the whole sort. If I ever have a son who's a recruitable prospect, I promise you he will stay home because that's the way it's supposed to go when you have a program, depending on where I live, I guess. But I think
you want some school buying you a tractor. That's what you want.
I want free gear, man. But I do think that there are pieces in place to feel good about buying stock in Miami. And then, of course, what North Carolina is doing, Andy, is owning their own state, pushing Clemson for kids in North Carolina. They're not always getting them, but they're pushing Clemson. And that's one thing that, is a path of resistance because Clemson has such an easy route to Charlotte. It's a hard thing to do. So, like, if you had to pick one of these two teams to buy stock in, like, I don't know that that's an easy answer.
No. Now, in this particular game, Miami's favored by 3. I'm more interested in the over-under. 67.5 is the number. I think that's going over.
I think I agree with you.
And I hope it does.
And it's going to be glorious.
Oh, yeah. For the sake of us viewers, go over because this could be one of the more fun games of this season. So I'm ready. Let's all go over. Now, one more game to talk about before we get to our random ranking, which is it's delightful. I promise.
I'm excited.
But we had a long conversation on Tuesday night's show about USC. You believe that USC, if they keep on winning, if they keep fighting on, that they can potentially crack the playoff? But what you mean is they win the way they won against Washington State and the way they won against Utah, not the way they won against the Arizona schools. They have UCLA. USC is a 2.5-point favorite going to the Rose Bowl. So either I'm eating crow because USC whips UCLA, or I'm also eating crow because I've said some things about Chip Kelly's tenure at UCLA that have not been particularly nice, but I do think they are playing really well, and it looks like they are becoming the team he wanted them to be. I think UCLA can win this game, Ari.
That's a 3-point spread. Of course they can. I just want to be abundantly clear, and I don't know where this turned, and I think people even that read the column that I wrote after I got fired up on this show don't understand me. I am not saying that USC is going to do it. I'm not saying that it's going to happen. The only thing I'm trying to say is that they deserve at least a sliver of the discourse about the playoff. That's it. As they sit there
deserve
undefeated.
A sliver of the discourse, and here's my sliver. It's not going to happen.
Alabama beats Florida. Notre Dame beats Clemson.
Yes.
USC rocks shit the next 2 weeks. They beat UCLA by 16. Yep. They go on to play whoever's available in the Pac-12 championship. They're unbeaten. Who is going to the playoff? A&M?
Yep. Yes, sir, buddy.
You think?
Howdy. Gig 'em.
Let me ask you this. Would Texas A&M fans be nervous?
No.
And you don't think they would be nervous?
Actually, I take that back. They'll be nervous because they're Texas A&M fans, and they're always nervous. They're perpetually nervous.
Oh, man. I don't know. I don't think it's as cut and dry as you think it is.
The piano to fall.
I don't think it's as cut and dry as you think it is. I'm just saying, I think that there are I don't think it's going to happen. Too many things have to happen for it to happen. So, like, if everybody's going to be like, look at you, Ari, you're an idiot because they didn't make it. That's not the point of the discussion. My point is that as we sit here on December 10th.
Look at you building in excuses.
I'm not building in excuses. I never once go sift through. Cameron, one of our producers, go skip through every ounce of audio I've ever had on the show and find me the clip or writing where I said they're going to do it.
Please don't waste your time doing that.
Because it didn't happen. The only point I'm trying to make is as they sit here at 15, A, they're misranked, and B, they are not dead. They're not dead. I don't care if it's a long shot.
UCLA beats them.
If that's the case.
And I'll have to take back. I am going to eat crow one way or the other. I will be taking back everything I said about the Chip Kelly regime at UCLA, or I'll be taking back what I've said to you over the last couple of weeks about USC. I will be eating crow. That is a guarantee come Saturday.
All that said, I would be nervous if I were a USC fan this week.
Yeah, I just think UCLA is playing really well. When they got Thompson Robinson back, it made the offense a little bit more potent. even though I thought Chase Griffin did a good job. And the defense is playing well. I mean, this looks like the team they thought they were getting when Chip Kelly showed up. It's just that they're getting it in year 3. So I'm very excited to watch that game because, listen, you can't not love watching USC's receivers play. Like, Drake London is one of my favorite players to watch. I love how he catches the ball and usually drags like 3 guys 6 yards before they bring him down. Like, that's so much fun to watch. But I just can't see USC putting together a complete enough game to compete with a real playoff caliber team like an Ohio State or like an Alabama or like a Clemson.
The other game that you don't have on here, and the reason, and trust me on this, I'll get to what I'm trying to say, is we don't have Utah, Colorado here.
No. But you're right. So, it's an interesting one.
It's an interesting game in the sense that Colorado is unbeaten. And for all the same reasons that I yell about USC, I think technically you could make the same case for Colorado. The reason why I use USC is because they've got a top 10 most talented team in college football, just from the amount of pure talent on the roster. And they've got Slovis and St. Brown, but I guess you could make the same logic. Unbeaten Power 5 champions hold weight. But also, while we're recording the show, Andy, the Oregon-Washington game got canceled this weekend.
Yes.
And that is like
Washington's in, right? That means Washington's in the Pac-12
I guess. I don't know. What have they played? 3 games? I mean, I don't know.
4. They're 3-1. They got beat by a Stanford team that looks like Stanford again.
Yeah. I don't know what this means, but if I were if we're doing the conference change rules, musical chairs stuff this week, Colorado wins and beats Utah, even though I think there's a chance that they could lose. You might start thinking about maybe getting USC another game against a team that's unbeaten. And who knows? And here's
one thing I can count on is the Pac-12 not doing the thing that would help its team make the playoff.
There's only one conference that does the right thing, or 2, right? ACC and SEC, or what about the Big 12? They've silently been perfect, haven't they?
Hey, listen, the Big 12 is the reason there's a season in 2020. If the Big 12 bails on August 11th, everybody else does too.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Yeah, it's a crazy world out there. But, I don't know what's going to happen with the Pac-12. Let's cross our fingers that, the extent of these outbreaks are already at the peak capacity and nobody else gets sick. But I don't know. I have my eyes. I'm like side eyeing the Pac-12 like this. I'm like making facial expressions.
Look at you incorporating the video. For those who are listening, we are doing this on video. Starting next week, we'll actually tell you when we're doing it on video and advertise it to you so you can watch it. We're only doing it as a practice now because we have no idea if I'm going to shoot boogers at the screen while I'm talking. But Ari was definitely doing a great side eye there. So,
well, you were over there doing your Gary Danielson stuff and all that.
Yeah.
So you're all part of it.
A great Gary impression.
You did a great impression. I'd like to know how many people found this by accident and are actually watching it.
I pray no one has. We're going to do better next week, I promise. But right now, we need to get to our weekly feature most weeks. The random ranking. This is something that was floating around the internet earlier this week. And I had a lot of fun going down memory lane with this, and I think you will too. Ari, we're going to rank our top 5 defunct mall stores. So we're talking places that they could be regional or national chains, but the places that you would hit when you went to the mall back when going to an indoor mall was a thing people did. So what is your number 5?
I actually felt so old doing this. And yes, I used to work in the mall in high school, and I think you said you did.
Where'd you work?
Lids.
Oh, that's right. You were at Lids. Yeah, I was at Champ Sports.
Champs. So, and that's where I got my affinity for eating a bunch of stuff in the food court and gaining a bunch of weight because I was right near the food court. And I knew the people that ran the pretzel stand next to the store that I worked at. So we had a little good
An autonomous unit for pinball snacking?
Yes. Okay. So my number 5 is Tower Records. And I think it's possible that there's other music related things later on in the list, but Tower Records is just kind of like an icon. And when I was in high school, that was like right when the burning CDs phase started and all the CDs. But I remember like when I was 12, 11 years old, there was nothing cooler that you could get than a CD in one of those Walkman. And I used to listen to them in the back of my parents' car. We had the Discman.
Well, and going through the CDs, because the CDs were in those long boxes, so people couldn't shoplift them.
The long boxes, and then you would have to like sift through them with your fingers. And as you go through and look, you try to discover new music. And the funny thing about it was you would buy CDs when you only liked one song on the CD. But like going through the section and seeing the album art and looking at the physical CD, and they always had like vinyl sections and T-shirts and stuff. Like Tower Records was like a blast.
When the Black Crowes released Amorica, and the cover art was a woman's crotch with an American flag bikini, like I remember being so scandalized by that. They put that in the mall?
What's your number 5?
My number 5 is Radio Shack, because while Radio Shacks existed outside malls, it was so convenient if you were in the mall and you were like, oh, I need like a Y adapter for my stereo. I'm just going to pop into Radio Shack and get that. And I'm going to spend $1.99 on it. Like, how did they afford the rent? What was Radio Shack? Because they had the Tandy computers for a while, but once they stopped really getting any market share with those, they're really just selling like cords and connections that can't do enough revenue to justify a space in the mall.
They had some pretty expensive stuff in there. Like if you wanted to buy a mini disc player or, they had stereo equipment. Yeah. I mean, my number 4 is Radio Shack. And the reason why it was for me is because I was kind of like a nerd that liked, I liked those types of things. Like,
me too.
Mini disc players came out. I was obsessed with it. When the iPod came out, I was obsessed with it. Like I always wanted the cool little trinket. And I always thought that Radio Shack was a cool place to go in there and just see stuff that you really that you could discover from an electronic standpoint. And it's like, I still don't even realize we'll drive on the highway, Andy, and I'll look to my left and my right, and then I'll see like Batteries Plus. And I always used to think to myself, like, why the hell is that place still open? But
Radio Shack.
Yeah, they buried Radio Shack. And it's like, why couldn't Radio Shack just expanded their battery department and had all the cool stuff that we still wanted? I'm like, there are some places and some things that would still be convenient to this day. It's the whole Blockbuster thing. It's like when Blockbuster was here, we didn't appreciate it to what it was. And then it left, and now I could use a Blockbuster. We didn't
appreciate them because they gouged us with late fees.
You know what? I'm not going to knock a man for creating a business plan, and I'm going to knock...
I'm going to knock them for getting greedy and getting bypassed by technology. So,
well, actually,
hooray for disruption.
The CEO, I'm kind of a stocks tech nerd, like I just said. And like, there are videos on YouTube of Microsoft's CEO, right when the Apple iPhone came out, like scoffing at the fact that the phone was going to be the next thing in personal computers, like laughing at it. And like, then iPhone took off and he should have been fired. And the CEO of Blockbuster, who had every bit the opportunity to bury Netflix and create their own streaming platform before, thought that people still wanted to come into the store. And both of those guys are like millionaires and the worst minds in the history of leading a company.
Golden parachutes are great. Number 4 for me, KB Toys. You love going to the toy store. Come on. And look, Toys R Us is where you go if you wanted to see every toy. But when your mom was busy looking in Casual Corner, you could pop into KB and see what the new G.I. Joe figures or the new Transformers look like and get an idea of what you wanted to put on the old Christmas list.
My number 3 is KB Toys, and that's like early life memories. Because like it wasn't a store that I would go into when I was a teen. But when I used to go to the mall with my mom when I was a child, that would be like hold your breath as you walk by it territory.
It smelled great. I don't know why
remember
KB
the smell.
stores smelled so good, but it smelled great.
It smelled like happiness for children.
It was amazing. All right, my number 3 is Sam Goody. We didn't have Tower Records where I lived. We had Camelot and Sam Goody and Music Land. Sam Goody was the most fun because Sam Goody also had posters and T-shirts and like you could buy a life-size David Bowie standee to put in your room if you wanted to. But the same general feel as you mentioned about Tower Records, just going through the CDs. It was so much fun. And yeah, you'd buy a CD for one song, and I still am angry at the music industry for forcing me to spend $17.99 on a Chumbawamba CD.
Yeah.
It still hurts. Like, why did I do that?
Could you imagine? Well, I had Savage Garden CD when I was a kid.
But at least now
That CD
those
was a
songs
one-hit
sucked,
wonder.
but at least they had 3 hits on that album.
Ooh, I want you, but I don't know if I need you.
Yeah.
Remember that song?
Ooh, I die to find out. But then, and then you had the Truly Madly Deeply, and then you had another. There was another slow song that was a hit. So yeah, no, I just, it drove me insane. And look, I did gravitate. I moved on to the Circuit City, Best Buy, Target, where they were selling CDs at a loss as loss leaders to get you in the store. So you could buy them at like $12 instead of $17. But it's still such a waste when you think about, for the cost of 1 CD a month, now you can have the entirety of the music.
I was just going to say,
all the music ever recorded.
When I was in high school, I bought the first iPod that came out. And I spent hours and hours and hours downloading albums and labeling them and creating this little box that I thought, I'm going to have 30,000 songs and 500 complete records on this that are.
And meanwhile, some Swiss guy's like, I'm just going to have all the songs and you pay me once a month and you can access them.
Like if you would have told me you could have every song ever created on the palm of your hand for $10 a month, my mind would have been blown, because I took so much pride in my iPod because I had the most extensive, most legit and accurate full albums, everything. I used to download full albums. I was quite the pirater when it came to like downloading music illegally on Napster. But like,
I don't know what the statute of limitations is on that, but
every single song on the record.
Your Napster days were a long time ago.
Yeah. Okay. My number 2, we're very much on the same page here. I'm on number 3 myself, right?
No, you're on number 2. Your number 3 was KB.
Oh, my number 2 is Suncoast. Did you guys have Suncoast?
That's a great one. Yes.
Suncoast. I loved movies. So it was just like a cool vibe in there. And movies were the same exact thing with as music. But, you know, my best friend in high school and, you know, when I was a kid was a big movie guy. He loved watching movies. I'd go in there. We'd be in there for an hour. It'd be like a babysitter. You can just like go through and see the VHS tapes.
That was the only place you could get like a t-shirt with a movie logo on it. Because there was no internet. You couldn't buy that off of Amazon. It didn't exist.
Right. And it was just like the vibe of the place was just cool. And like, it was like, I just feel like back in the 2000s when all these places were still open, that it was much easier to buy gifts for loved ones.
Or impulse buy gifts for loved ones.
Yes.
It's hard. Like if you open up Amazon and say, I'm going to shop for somebody that I love, it's the amount of choice is almost paralyzing. Like because you could literally buy anything in the world.
Well,
and they'll deliver it to you in 2 days.
That it's much easier to browse in the mall than it is on Amazon. You have everything on earth at your fingertips. You can buy motor oil or a Rolex. But you have to buy things naturally.
Curated choice. It's like listening to a radio station versus listening to Spotify.
You walk into Suncoast, you leave with something you didn't even know you needed.
And you probably didn't.
You didn't.
You didn't need it. You didn't want it, but you gave the money for it anyway.
I cannot tell you how much money in my early 20s I blew on building DVD collection. Like how stupid. Remember how expensive
our friend 3-year Letterman on Twitter. He has a huge DVD collection.
The Blu-ray, I had to get like Casino and because like I was like buying all the new technology so I could watch movies.
You didn't do laser discs, did you?
Oh, I don't think so. No,
my wife's family when she was a kid did laser discs. Her dad was a laser disc person.
Yeah, I don't even know what that is. I've heard it. I don't like know what.
It is a DVD the size of a record, essentially, the size of a full-size album.
That's crazy.
It existed. All right, my number 2 is County Seat. County Seat, the most basic of basic mall square clothing. In high school, I probably owned almost exclusively plaid shirts, and they were all from County Seat. And side note, I didn't get a lot of dates in high school, Ari.
You didn't?
But I loved County Seat.
I don't think that existed in Phoenix, Arizona, so I don't even know what you're talking about.
That's because everybody was cool in Phoenix, Arizona. But yeah, County Seat, and some people had Chesking. And I was going to say Structure, but Structure actually still exists. Structure is just Express Men. So it just changes.
Oh, yeah, Structure. I forgot about Structure. Yeah. Man, there's these lists. They bring you back. Okay, are you ready for my number 1?
I'm ready.
EB Games.
Oh yeah.
That was my heaven. And all these stores existed in the mall that I worked in. So, I got to go to all of them. Like EB Games. Remember Sega Dreamcast? God, I remember
Absolutely.
having Sega Dreamcast, and I would go into EB Games. I'd get so excited to buy NFL 2K. Man, those were the days. Like, sometimes I feel like the simplicity of childhood is the apex of life, because it's just like I would go with my friend, we'd buy the new Sega
Wait,
Dreamcast sports game.
wait till you actually have kids. You'll get super jealous of that.
Yeah, and then they are like the joy of just the little stuff, because I don't know, like I want a PS5 right now, and some as much as things change, they stay the same, but like I still don't get that like exciting, like that exciting nervousness in your I don't know how to explain it, just the excitement when you're a kid.
Tingling in your loins.
Yeah, just like so. Well, I don't know about that, but
all right. Well,
that was
my
it.
heaven is my number one. They had these in different parts of the country. The particular one I am talking about, the store is called the Swiss Colony. And the one I'm talking about was at Cutler Ridge Mall down in South Florida in the late 80s. And it was basically a food gift shop kind of place. You could buy meats and cheeses and tins of cookies to send to people. The meats were the key here. This is the first place I got to taste real good beef jerky. They sold 8-foot long beef ropes. And I asked my mom for one. She's like, no, absolutely not. And then my dad walked in. He's like, hell yeah, let's get 5. And it was absolute heaven. Every time we went to the mall, I found my way to the Swiss Colony, and I was getting either beef stick or beef jerky, and they had samples of cheese. It was perfect.
I don't know what this place is, but as you talk, I'm Googling it, and I'm like, my mouth is watering. And I knew that we couldn't possibly get through a random ranking worth my mouth not watering somehow. So mall stores, I was like, this is going to be a weird random ranking because we're not like arguing about food, but alas, you saved the day.
It's that first 6-foot long beef rope. I think really, it might have been 8 foot long. I don't know. The memory fades, but the taste lives forever. I just remember getting it, and it had the perfect snap on the casing. And I was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever had in my life. If this is all I have for the rest of my life, I will be happy. And alas, the Swiss Colony, no longer a place that I can go and get a rope of beef of varying lengths.
I feel like if I could go back in time, the number one thing I could do, I think, would be to go enjoy a nice Vegas night in like the 70s when it was Vegas the way it was supposed to be. But now I think number 2 might be just one more fall Sunday in the shopping mall after the NFL games. When I was a kid, I'd watch my favorite NFL team. Then after they won, or most of the time lost, I'd go to the mall and just hang out with my friends. And I'd give it all for the one more day like that.
One more day hanging out at Lids. Did you have a hot sauce store in your mall?
A hot sauce store?
We had a hot sauce store in the mall where I worked at Champs.
No, not at the mall I worked
Again,
at.
another store. How do they pay their rent? Everything they sell costs $3.
Yeah, like the mall that I worked in high school, I don't know, is like the typical shopping mall that you have, because like it was Scottsdale Fashion Square, and you and
I've been to Scottsdale Fashion Square. That's a fine mall.
But it's also
much nicer than the Seminole Town Center and the Altamont Mall, which were the 2 Champs locations I worked at.
The Fashion Square at Scottsdale is like the top floor is Breitling, Rolex, Nordstrom, Louis Vuitton, Gucci. Like
it
it's
goes
like that
across
type of mall.
Street. If you're upstairs, you like walk across the street while you're in the mall. It's incredible.
And there's a wing on the other side where all the normal people stores like that we worked in were. So you still had the same, but like it wasn't the same type of environment that you would have in a normal mall. So it was a very interesting dynamic. But also I worked at Paradise Valley Mall a ton, and that one was just a normal mall that had all the junk food and everything else too. So God, I you know what? I went shopping for holiday gifts for my girlfriend last week at North Park Mall in Dallas. Very nice mall. And I do miss shopping in the mall. There's something amazing about shopping at the mall in December, isn't there?
I love the smell of commerce in the morning.
The Christmas music is going. Everybody's happy. Credit cards are out. Debt isn't accrued. Like, come on. Like, there's nothing better than buying things you didn't know you wanted before you walked into the mall. And that is an experience that's lost online.
Well, everybody enjoy your mall trips this weekend, but I have a feeling most of you are going to spend Saturday watching college football, just like we are. And after those games, we'll be right back here with you to break them all down. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe, rate, review. Starting next week, you're going to be able to watch the show on video if you'd like. You can see our ugly mugs as we say this stuff. You can see me singing. You probably don't want to see that, but you can. And please subscribe to The Athletic. We have a great promo going on right now. Buy one subscription, get one for a friend or a loved one or a family member. You buy one, you gift one. So for the price of 1 year, one regular priced year, you get really 2 subscriptions, one that you can give to somebody else. And I promise you, they will be your best friend or your favorite relative, or at least you'll be their favorite relative when you give them the gift of The Athletic. If you want that, go to theathletic.com/Andy Staples. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you after the games.